When I was a teenager, my father had a heart condition my whole life, and my whole family, everything was sort of organized around his illness. Because of that, I became very much a perfectionist and quiet. Like, I didn't want to make waves. I didn't want to add stress to the environment, pretty common, in a house where somebody's very sick. And when I was 16, he had his fatal heart attack, and I performed CPR, and I was not successful. Felt like I had failed.
Hi, I'm Julie.
And I'm Razy.
Welcome to our podcast, Money and Meaning, where we talk about success that matters.
Hi. Today we are joined by Dr. Robyn Koslowitz. She's a psychologist and a trauma expert and helps parents, business owners, and leaders be their best selves in their daily life. She just recently published a new book called Post-Traumatic Parenting and is a host of a podcast of the same name. And we're really excited that she was able to join us today.
Welcome.
Thanks so
Welcome
much.
to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So our podcast is Money and Meaning. And one of the things that we love is being impactful with our work. So we started to bring on business owners and leaders in the community. I try to highlight what they do and how they are impactful in our community. So,
do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into this space? Because if being a psychologist doesn't mean that you specifically talk about this topic. So give us a little bit about your background.
So I feel like all research is research, right? So when you are a psychologist, very often the things you specialize in are the things that, say something to you. So many, many years ago, I was a young mother. I was a graduate student, and I had this secret. I had PTSD. It was so secret, it was secret from me. I didn't know. I thought I had panic attacks. I didn't know that it was actually PTSD. So I remember frantically searching the stacks at the library, looking for basically how will my damage my baby? Because if it's so hard for me to be inside my body, what's it like to be a baby inside my body, right? And there really was no research whatsoever. And then 9/11 happened, and suddenly trauma was everywhere, and people were talking about it, and we understood trauma. Prior to 9/11, the psychology world didn't talk about trauma. Before TikTok, no one was talking about psychological diagnoses in the way we do now. So I realized that I was going to have to figure this out myself. And I was going to have to write the book that I needed to read. So I really started researching the impact of trauma on parenting by very strongly researching child development and also learning how to treat trauma. And when you put those two things together, you get a book like Post-Traumatic Parenting. But the biggest piece that I learned, and the truth is Post-Traumatic Parenting is a parenting book, but a lot of people who aren't parents are reading it because it's really a how do I recover from trauma guide. Parenting just happens to be the best reason to recover from trauma,
right?
But it's not the only reason.
So if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your kids.
Yeah, or the only reason why you're gonna do it is gonna be for your kids. Because I'll tell you, for me, my trauma adaptation, and I write my story in the book, I'm very open about my story, was, and this is hard to hear, but when I was a teenager, my father had a heart condition my whole life, and my whole family, everything was sort of organized around his illness. And because of that, I became very much a perfectionist and quiet. Like, I didn't want to make waves. I didn't want to add stress to the environment, pretty common, in a house where somebody's very sick. And when I was 16, he had his fatal heart attack, and I performed CPR, and I was not successful. And everyone was calling me a hero, but I knew I failed. Now, many years later, I understood that there's no way a 16-year-old can actually successfully perform CPR on a grown adult male. The physics of it wouldn't have worked. I didn't have the upper body strength. If you're not cracking ribs, you're not restarting someone's heart. But at the time, I felt like I had failed. So I really developed this perfectionism and this other superpower of dissociation. I could just retreat into my research or my work or my, or whatever I was focusing on at the moment, and then I didn't feel any stress at all. And I thought it was great, right? I thought, this is fabulous. It makes me this great student. I used to be able to maximize every minute of my time because I was commuting by New Jersey Transit from Lakewood to NYU, where I was a graduate student, and I could use every minute of my commute on my laptop and then come home and focus on my kids. And I was like, this is so good. It wasn't great, safety-wise. I could literally have a drunk guy sleeping on my shoulder and not notice because I'm typing, and the driver always had to tell me, we're in Lakewood now. This is the last stop. So, okay, but it worked. It was great. Until my son turned 10, and he looked at me one day and he started to cry and he said, "Mommy, where do you go when you go away behind your eyes?"
Oh, wow.
because when you're talking to me, you're not really there, and I don't like it. And he started to cry. And I remember looking at him and thinking, it was as if, like, I'm 5 feet tall. So it was as if he said, like, Mommy, I need you to be 6 feet tall in order to be my mother. Like, okay, but like, what should I do with that? Like, I can't do anything with that, right?
It's so much a part of who you are.
It's so much a part of who I am, right? Like, you want me to feel my feelings?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right? So, but that's when I realized, like, I have to change this. Like, this is a superpower.
Is not.
Right, but it's not working. Like, by the way, every superpower story ever, the superpower is also the thing that's your biggest problem, right? So I had to figure that out. Now, for my work, I didn't. Even for like my marriage, I didn't. Like, so when I was working, I remember one time, and like, I'm sure like a lot of listeners of your podcast or watchers of this are, people in jobs. And sometimes it was great in my job. Like, I remember I had a boss once, and I would be coding data, and there was like a precursor to Slack, and she would like message me like, for status updates. And I would say to her, look, I am dialed in. In 4 hours, you will have all your data. But if you keep interrupting me with these 15-minute, I'm not one of the undergrads who's like probably in Starbucks, not actually in the office doing her work. Like, I am here, I'm a grad student, I am being paid for my work. It will be done. If you keep interrupting me though, it will be less good. And she was like, okay, Robyn is, and I just like muted the inter-office chat, and it was great. And she got great work out of me, and we worked very well together. She was willing to make space for my neurology. My friends like sort of knew, like, if I'm spaced out for a minute, like, just ignore it. It's fine. That's what she's like. My husband was willing to like be like, oh, you're not available tonight. You're like very dialed in on something. Fine, we'll talk tomorrow. Like, my kids weren't going to do that.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody else is going to do that. Everybody, like, in fact, people valued me for it. Like, I was a great team member on research projects. Like, they loved it. But my kids, right? So it was my kids.
They are here to heal us, our children. Our children are here to heal us.
They're here, and we can heal for them. I feel like if they're here to heal us, then I give them the responsibility. We're here to heal ourselves as we adults. But our children can be a very healing relationship, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well said. Okay,
So can we just add, to backtrack a little bit, how old were you when you started going for your, I want to really pursue this, and like, when was that time that?
So my mother was a guidance counselor, and and I always was fascinated by the whole psychology concept and everything. But I started realizing as I was reading that, like, I didn't want to know what works. I want to know why it works. And so right away in undergrad, when we have those career fairs and they're talking to you about like, what do you want to do? I thought I would want to be a guidance counselor like my mother, until one of the people I was talking to said, oh, but all of your questions sound like a psychologist. You want to be the person who writes the textbook that the guidance counselor uses, not the guidance counselor who uses the textbook. Which was very perceptive of him. And I said, oh, yeah, that's what I want. And the more I looked into psychological research, the more I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. But I honestly thought I would be a researcher. I didn't think I would like actually become, like, I opened up a practice. I have associates. I work in a lot of schools. I consult with a lot of places. I didn't think that was going to be my job. So
Very interesting how it took you, right?
Yeah.
Where life takes you.
Yeah.
So, okay. So going back to where, like, the topic that we wanted to bring in.
So for us, it's, I write a lot of content on LinkedIn, and I find it so interesting how analogies about parenting apply to business so frequently.
Totally.
I mean, people are people,
right?
But there's a lot of humanity that comes out in the workplace. We spend a lot of hours at work. There's management, there's employees, there's the dynamics between them, and I'm assuming that you have in your previous experience dealt with interpersonal behavior specifically related to childhood trauma in a workplace environment.
What you're saying is very perceptive, right? Because I think that how you are is how you are, right? How you are as an employee is very often how you are as a parent, which is how you are as a boss, which is how you are as a spouse, right? If you're an anxious person whose brain is always looking for problems, which could be a very good thing, it can be a superpower, right? You can problem solve in advance, and great, your redundancies, fabulous, right? It can work for you, but you're probably not then the most laid back mother on the block. Right? So, and in general, difficult people, right? People who just have a hard time getting along with other people do everything with a level of difficulty, right? And then same thing with easygoing people. They do everything with a level of easygoing, which is great unless you're a systems engineer, right? In which case we don't want you to be so easygoing, right? So to a certain extent, what's your personality? Your personality is not necessarily something innate to you. Your personality is a way of being that you have learned and rehearsed over multiple years. So of course your childhood trauma is going to show up in your workplace, because how could it not? Right? If you grew up in a home where your mistakes were always immediately highlighted and everyone was always like on you and made fun of you and like you were mocked, right? The minute you get feedback at work, of course there's going to be a trauma app in the back of your brain that says, oh no, it's happening again. Somebody's criticizing me. This must not happen. How you handle that depends. You might quit the job. You might yell back. You might become a perfectionist and do it even better, right? Because just because two people have the same experience doesn't mean their coping is going to be the same. Some of that is neurological and born. Some of that is rehearsed behavior. Like you try what works and then you keep doing it. Problem is you try what works in like third grade. And maybe you didn't understand the world that well in third grade, right? And now you're an adult and we want to update your algorithm a little bit.
Right.
That's really what you're asking is very perceptive because it's true. You can't just be a talking head at work, right? You are the person. You're bringing your personality to it. Of course.
So it's very interesting that you say that. Like I try to help a lot of business owners when they're hiring. They do personality tests and things, and there's a hiring process. But when you hire, or I'm lucky, thank God everyone on my team is emotionally healthy. We don't have a lot of the
drama.
Yes, drama in the workplace. But it wasn't always like that. I did have to deal with at different times, people that weren't, and it showed up, like, constructive criticism, all of a sudden they would burst out in tears,
right?
And I had to console them like I was actually a therapist. So it's like, is there a way to, when you're interviewing someone, is there a way to kind of tell, like, if that's, like, meaning, let's say they will be a good admin and they'll work well, their work ethic is there, and but
I don't know if there's always a way to tell, because I think even like these personality assessments, things like that, just because someone has a certain personality doesn't mean that that's necessarily the way they're going to show up in the workplace. Someone could be a perfectionist and therefore procrastinate, right? You think, oh great, she's a perfectionist, so she's going to do everything perfectly. Not necessarily, right? It might not. So that's why I don't love personality tests, because they tell you what tendencies. They're also self-reported, right? So they tell you what the person believes their tendencies to be. They don't necessarily tell you the truth of what their tendencies are. Personality also isn't a prison. It's not permanent. It's a set of learned behaviors. What I would be looking for more is a lot of clarity, so that when you do see someone, reacting to something surprisingly, right away talking to them about it. I noticed in that meeting you got really quiet. You want to help me understand what was going on for you? And then she might say, I felt so attacked. And then you could be like, oh, that really wasn't my intent. I was just giving you feedback. And like, let me just clarify what feedback means to me, right? Because you're not always going to see that in advance. There's not a forensic way of
Well,
seeing
maybe there are certain questions in an interview, instead of asking like, the typical interview questions, maybe you can ask certain questions to kind of get an idea if the person's like in a more emotionally healthier, in a more emotional, healthier space. Like, if people are going to get insulted every 5 seconds at work, then it's going to turn into a toxic environment.
You certainly look for how people are answering certain types of questions, right? If every single last 5 jobs they left because the boss was a narcissist and this was that, and there's like a very external locus of control. You're like,
certain patterns of behavior.
There's a pattern here. You're certainly looking for the way they speak and like noticing certain patterns. And then if you notice something, you ask about it,
Right.
I noticed you're not saying much about, you said a lot about your last job, but the job before you didn't say much about it.
Right, like if they cut someone off after they worked for them,
Right.
that's a red
Exactly.
flag.
So one of the things that we were going to talk about was, if you notice that someone is particularly triggered, or whatever, I don't know what the word you would use, within a work setting, how would you deal with it? You're not their therapist. And I think so that's what you're sharing, is that just commenting on what you're seeing and kind of opening up that conversation.
Yeah, the clarity and communication of, this is what I'm noticing. I just want to make it very clear, I am trying to give you feedback. I am not trying to criticize you. I'm not trying to belittle you, right? And then having that conversation and making things very much not personal, right? Because sometimes someone's in the wrong role for their neurology. Like, you're a great person. I like you a lot. You're fabulous. And in the position you're in, we need somebody who can work much faster. So we're going to find you a different place in this organization, or what would you need to make this work? The way I had that with my boss, of being able to say to her, if I'm going to be interrupted every 15 minutes, I'm definitely not going to get it done. I need the trust, because I'm not one of the undergrads who are flighty and not always in the office. If you're going to give me that trust, I will then give you back this very good product. So like, you have to have that conversation about people's tendencies, and then ask, like, is this something you can change or not? Because if it's not something you can change, then maybe this position isn't for you, not because I don't like you, not because I'm mad at you, but because, if I need somebody who's available at 8 a.m. and you're not available till 9:30 a.m., I could like you a lot and I could think you're great, but you're not available at the time I need, right? This isn't personal,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Really interesting. So we've talked a little bit about management and employees, but we know a lot of people who sometimes they have a lot of dreams or aspirations, or they really want to have a fulfilling career, but there's something holding them back. Is this a pattern that you see related to the topic that we're speaking about?
So yeah, and I think that going back in the book, I have this metaphor. I call it the trauma app. So the trauma app is it's basically an adaptation your brain makes. In the moment that you're traumatized, you say, oh my gosh, I feel so unsafe. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know how the world works anymore. And then you come up with an operating principle that lets you keep being a person in the world. So let's say, like for me, if stress, dissociate, right? If in doubt, do it perfectly. If, let's say it's for somebody else, if somebody's criticizing me, explode, right? If someone's criticizing me, fawn and be the nicest person in the world and people please, right? That's the trauma app. Very often developed at a moment of trauma, very often developed at a moment of trauma when you were very young.
Right.
And you didn't necessarily have the coping skills that you have now, right? So if you have that kind of a trauma app, the idea is to deselect its permissions, exactly like you would on a phone. I feel criticized, so I'm gonna people please and say yes to everything. I'm actually gonna not do that. I'm gonna hold my boundary and say, no, this doesn't work for me, right? And I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that until such time as this becomes second nature. Like now I've learned it. Now I know it, right? Because like I said, personality is not a prison. If you don't like something about yourself, if something holds you back, then you have one of two choices. Either you can outsource it or you can learn it, right? You can change it. So if you're outsourcing it, right? If you're outsourcing it, it's kind of like, you know what, my time management isn't great. I need to hire a secretary who is amazing at managing time, right? Because my brain's never going to be able to do that. So let me hire someone who really has that neurology that I don't have. Or, you know what, I need to create systems and I need to figure out what is a time management system that works for me. Figure it out and stick to it. Just make sure that works for me part actually works for you, not because some coach on LinkedIn said it's a great system for them, right? I just had somebody message me in the post-traumatic parenting community. Somebody, there's this trend on TikTok of locked in, that like for the Burr months from like September, October, November, December, you lock in a change you want to make, like let's say getting up at 5 a.m. to exercise or whatever, and then you form the habit, and then by the time like New Year's resolutions come, you don't need one because you've done it. And she's feeling so bad about herself because it's not happening, and it's not happening. I'm so lazy. I'm so unmotivated. I'm never going to change. My life's never going to get better. This is me. I never, accomplish the things I want to accomplish. And I said to her, so what was the barrier to waking up at 5 a.m? She's like, oh, I didn't hear my alarm. I said, why didn't you hear your alarm? Well, my baby woke up 3 times, and I guess I was just very tired. So I look at her like, wait, sleep is a fundamental human need. Your baby woke up 3 times. Maybe getting up 5 a.m. to exercise is just not yours. I get it. It worked for these people on TikTok. I love that.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day, but maybe not when you have a baby who's waking up 3 times at night, right?
Yeah.
It sounds great. Somebody sold you a system that worked well for her, so that basically means she's really good at graphics and TikTok. It doesn't mean she knows everything about you or human nature, right?
100%.
Yeah.
You have to do what works for you.
Yeah.
And I do everything. It's not all cookie cutter,
She gets up early in the morning.
I get up early in the morning,
but that works for you,
right? No, and again, to me, it's like brushing my teeth. Like I don't not do it, but again, there were times where my baby was up a few times a night, and it's very hard to tell myself what you just said, but you really have to do that because otherwise you could beat yourself up for the whole day. Like I didn't exercise. Okay, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
Right. But we talk a lot about how self-help, self-help work and in business and growth in business, and how you could have someone who's very smart and they could not be successful because of their traumas.
Right.
And you have someone who's not as smart, but because they've done so much self-help work, they break through these barriers and they become very successful. I myself have over the last 10 years and I'm continuously just working on myself. Being a broker, you're subject to rejection, and there's so many things that and I had a massive fear of rejection, I can't say I got over it because I still deal with it and I still have to get over it, but I definitely deal with it better than I day one.
Right.
I had when I was for like one of my first years of the business, I knocked on a door. It was in a neighborhood that I moved in, and the person came out like screaming at me, like if we wanted to broker, we'll put a sign in the yard, and I went back to my car and I literally was like crying, and my husband had to calm me down. I called him up, and now that's like second nature. It's no big deal. Like it happens, because I've worked cold calling. I couldn't pick up a phone.
Right.
All these things, and I try to like stress out there of like how doing these things, it helps not only in your personal life, like to get through these, for your personal, your relationships in life, but also with business. And I see how like there's people out there, like even just on LinkedIn, the people that are successful on LinkedIn are the people who are okay making themselves vulnerable. The people who all they do is like these businessy posts. They don't get traction.
Right.
Because people like they appreciate that vulnerability and that people could share, but it's a hard thing to do.
Right. But what you're really saying is this idea of deselecting permissions on the trauma app, right? And telling the trauma app like, no, it feels like I might get rejected. That feels really scary. I'm going to do it anyway. A lot of psychotherapy with kids who, let's say, have anxiety or OCD or anything is like, feel the yucky feeling and do it anyway.
Right.
And you will be okay afterwards. And then you update your brain. Like, this is not so bad. Like you're saying, the first time you experience rejection, it's very, very scary.
Right.
But you're going to be rejected. If you go out anticipating it and sort of being like, yep, it's going to stink, and then I will get into my car and have a sip of my coffee and move on with my life, then it's so much better. If, in fact, you go the other direction of like, all right, let's see how many rejections can I collect today, right? And you flip the meaning and you flip the script, you get better.
Our first podcast that we recorded, we were both so
nervous.
Right.
And we had to psych ourselves up. We're like, we're gonna sink and it's gonna get better.
Right.
And
Exactly.
we
Do you have any like stories or incident like to share of or I don't know, it's like private because you're working with people, but like just success stories that you've seen people who had like such crazy trauma and like they were able to.
I mean, so many. That's what we have from the post-traumatic parenting community, right?
Right.
Like so many people who tell me that like, they never realized that what was holding them back was their trauma and their trauma app. And like, okay, I don't like this about myself, so let me deselect that permission. I feel shy and I'm going to go to the party anyway, right? And I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to try because I'm deselecting permissions. I yell at my kids. I just yell, I explode, I just lose it. I'm going to sing my instructions when I'm feeling stressed out instead of speaking them. I'm going to take a half hour on my way home from work to like sit in my car, eat a snack, drink, recenter myself so when I come into the house, my body isn't shrieking for my attention so that when my kids get loud, I'm calm. I'm going to deal with my mental load like on Sunday, like cook all the suppers of the week so I come home at the same time with my kids and I don't have to be like cooking while doing 30 things at the same time, right? There are so many things that people thought like my life is just going to be chaotic. I have demanding kids. That's it. It's over. Actually, when you take a class, when you read something, when you learn, you're not trapped, right? Whatever that barrier you thought, I'm a yelly person. That's it. I yell.
Right. Or I'm not a morning person.
Right?
But what you're describing is really not looking back. It's really looking forward.
Right. There is no such thing as the past, right? The past is the present is the future. Because you always have to go to the place of, where did I learn that? Do I still want to believe it?
So your inner beliefs, your core beliefs.
Right. So you learned that somewhere. You learned, I'm just not an organized person, right? I'm just shy. Right? Like by nature, I am an introverted person. A lot of times when I go into schools and like I give these like social emotional learning workshops to the kids and we talk about introversion and extroversion, I ask like, am I an introvert? And the kids are like, no, you're an extrovert. You're so friendly. You're so funny, right? But by nature, I am a very shy person. I'm really happiest like at my desk doing research, writing, like not necessarily doing all those other things. Like it's not what's natural to my brain. I needed to learn it though. Right? Like this, like when people say I'm not a morning person. Right. It's not about being a morning person. Right. It's about, you had a baby who woke up 3 times and you need a couple of hours of sleep or you can't function.
Right.
So it's not about morning person, not morning person. It's about the realities of your life right now. Maybe what we need to do instead is you want to make sure to exercise every day. Let's find another corner of time that you can exercise every day, but let's not stop meaning that means I'm lazy and I'm stupid and I'm never going to get anywhere and I never finished my degree and I never this and I never that. And then when your kids make you feel like a failure, of course you're going to lash out. Because like everybody's making you feel like a failure, and now your kid is like saying you're the worst parent in the world. So of course it's just going to become a self-perpetuating cycle. Why wouldn't it?
So we deal with a lot. I talk all the time to business owners and people who struggle with sales. I'm not a salesperson. I can't do sales. I want to go and pay someone. Just yesterday in one of our masterminds, this woman was debating she should take out a loan to hire someone to do sales for her. Okay. And I said, you know your product the best. You can handle the objections the best of why they should buy, why they shouldn't buy, all these. But what's stopping you from making a plan? Don't call it sales if you want, right? You have a little bit of a hard time with sales,
we
right?
just had this conversation
right. So and people say I'm not a salesperson, and you have to sell yourself somewhat to get where you are.
Right.
Well, I know, but there's stuff that holds us back.
It's the uncomfortableness.
It's a skill.
It's the uncomfortableness.
It's a skill. So either you value learning it because you do need it, it's important for your job, or the realities of your business are such that you don't have the cash flow to hire someone. So either you're going to learn the skill, right? Or you're going to outsource the skill. Either way, what you're not going to do is make this about like there's something wrong with me, right? Like if I need, like when I was working on my book, I hired somebody, a developmental editor, to work with me and sort of set me homework goals. Like give me the next 12 pages of this chapter by Monday. I don't need help with usually when you hire a developmental editor, you need help with writing. I don't need help writing. I was a freelance writer before I did anything. That's how I put, like in graduate school, that was my job. Like that's how I earned money. So I don't need help writing. But I do need help because there's so many competing priorities in my life. I need somebody to make the book a giant priority. Like I am paying her on Wednesday to have read these pages and give me critique on them. And it's not even, it's holding me accountable. It's also like, I'm gonna waste the money that I gave her, so I have to get it to her by Monday so that she can read them by Wednesday. That then brings it higher up on my list, even if, some school is calling and shrieking that there's an emergency and they must talk to me. I don't mean an emergency with a patient. I mean like a grant that they want me to rewrite that they actually have 6 months to do, and it's really not. We have to redefine what emergency actually means, right?
Yeah. One question that came up when we were talking about interviewing you was if this particular post-traumatic challenge is of a greater degree within the Jewish community with generational trauma, Holocaust, that kind of stuff.
I don't think so. I think trauma is sadly what unites us the most. And that's why when I wrote the book, I made this mindful choice to write it for general audiences and use a general publisher, because wherever I go to I go to writing events, I cover toy events, and I talk about like whether or not a toy is good for your kids and like things like that. I research, so I go to a lot of conferences. Whoever I meet from whatever culture I meet, when I say I study this concept called post-traumatic parenting, everyone says, oh my gosh, that's me, right? Like everywhere, wow. Right? Particularly in the C-suite, by the way, like you just see that like over and over again where people are like, I have trauma, or they say the other way, I went through terrible, terrible things, but I'm not traumatized. It made me better. I'm like, right.
The superpower is the...
I wonder what, your employees would say, but right? And maybe, sure, it is, by the way, the other side of that is it is a superpower.
Yes.
Right? Like my dissociation superpower, now that I can turn it on and off at will, is fabulous.
Yes.
Right? Because I can turn it off when I'm with my kids. And that, also I explain in the book how you turn your superpowers on and off. But if you think about it, if you could have the superpower without all the back problems that it led, you're golden.
Yeah.
Right? Like this woman who's saying I'm not good at sales, if she could learn, like you're saying, your product best, if she could learn how to sell with her passion for this product, right, then she would be golden, because she has it sounds like someone with like attention to detail, who, thinks, who understands, who's analyzing, right? She could use that for sales. She'd be amazing. Right. It's just a skill she needs to learn. There's no such thing as a skill you can't learn. Sometimes there's a skill that you don't need to learn.
I think in general, sales is you're pouring into people, and you have to have energy, and you have to listen to people. And I think that a lot of women who I talk to in business, they're not taking care of themselves enough. Right. And when it comes to the sales aspect of their business, meaning they're very creative and they created a great product, and someone I was dealing with, she's selling this really creative product that she innovated, but when it came down to doing the sales, she's like, I have no energy left, because she wasn't really. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. And then so either that's learning self-care, which by the way in the book we have this rule. I have this rule that self-care is childcare. It's not self-care and childcare. If you leaving to, let's say, go meet with friends to renew yourself, right? And your 2-year-old is like, no, mommy, stay home. No, only mommy, right? And you feel like, oh, how could I take time away from my kids to go out with my friends? your time with your friends is time with your kids.
Right.
Because if you're restoring yourself, you can't bring your whole self to parenting. If you're selfless, right, which we women were taught to be selfless.
What's that story
right?
about the mother eating the egg in
Right,
the kitchen
exactly.
or
You're
something?
making a mother for your children, right? I have to make a mother for my children. Sometimes that's going to the gym. Sometimes that's, you know, hanging out with my friends. Sometimes that's taking a class or going to a book club, whatever it is that fills me. But if there's something that's draining the system that you know how to do, but it's draining the system, and there's a method for outsourcing that to somebody else, by all means. If you say, listen, in this business, I am the this thing, and this thing, but I am not the that, great, then do that. Like, you know what you're good at, you know what you're not good at. Like, I am not the person who's answering your texts every 15 minutes, right? That's not who I am on this team. So if you're somebody who, like, I am an innovator and I have this product and this, I'm not a salesperson, then make a plan for getting a salesperson. Maybe it's not going to happen until the cash flow of your business is better. But within 5 years, that's the goal.
Right.
How can I outsource this to sales?
Right.
Eventually, when I grow to that level. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to be trapped doing sales forever. Right? Sometimes it's not worth learning a skill. Like, you totally could. I have learned this about everything. I'm not tech savvy by nature, and I have learned to be so much better at so many tech tasks and things like that. But like, if I want to, I can like sit down and edit a reel on Canva and make it look great and play around with it. It's not the best use of my time, right? Like, I'm a highly trained professional in psychology. I'm not a highly trained professional in Canva, right? So I could do it. And I'm glad I know how to do it so that when I hire someone,
you have the choice.
But I don't have to do it. It makes sense for me. And it's the same thing, by the way, with household tasks. Anything that your mommy doesn't need to do for you, or you can't, you know, or you don't need a PhD in psychology for, it's just not my job, right? Anybody can iron your shirt, right? You need your mommy to bake honey cookies with you, right? Because like, that's an experience that you need to have with your mommy. Your mommy needs to take you uniform shopping for high school for the first time, right? That needs to be me. Anybody could hem that uniform though.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And I have better expertise than sewing. And I think years ago I used to try to do everything. You probably have a lot of women like this also, where it's like, I should pay for the cut up onions in the store. It just takes a few minutes to cut the onions, but do you have those few minutes? Right?
Is that how you want to
Right. Is that how you want to spend that time?
Yeah.
Even if, you know, and I once had that conversation, you know that like line in Yiddish about a good balabasta is half a salary? So one time I was spending a lot of money, I was like buying, let's say, the pre-cut vegetables and stuff like that, and an older relative of mine was looking at this and she's like, you spent this amount of money on pre-diced onions when you could just dice them yourself? A good balabasta is half a parnasa. I'm like, I literally have 3 jobs, right? I have a job running a practice. I consult in schools. And I have my parenting classes. I have 3 parnassas, so I'll have to give up the half, right?
That's a great answer.
Right? Like, I said it very nicely and very respectfully, as one should communicate with the older generation who might not remember.
Right.
I also think they don't always remember. I remember one time that same relative told me, a baby feels very secure if the minute they're crying, you pick them up right away. And then she also said, a kitchen stays clean if you wash something the minute it hits the sink. And I'm thinking, what if the baby is crying when the dish hits the sink, right? I think you forgot, and I was mother of twins, so like, I think forgot what small children are like, right? Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes the advice that people give you is not good advice for you,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, sure. And I think probably the woman you're talking about, so maybe like, someone else is cooking the suppers of the week of your family because you have this expertise in this product and it drains you to do sales. So you need to fulfill your energy somewhere else, right? And the way you're going to fulfill your energy somewhere else is by not cooking. And fair enough. And you have to shift that mindset. I am a product developer who is now selling this product because I'm a business owner. Anybody could chop the onions.
That's good. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So
I think we have to
we
wrap
have
up.
to wrap
but
up. I think we should leave off with one thing that maybe you feel is.
I know that a lot of people find therapy very cost prohibitive, and I think that it's so beautiful that you've written a book, because I feel like that democratizes the information that people can access. Aside from reading your book, which obviously sounds like it's a really great tool, are there any other specific tools that you'd recommend people to use if they want to get help in this area?
So for exactly the reason you said, one of the biggest, like, I think, gifts of the fact that I have this presence on social media is to democratize everyone's access. I love how you're putting that, right? So, you know, I have a very big community on Instagram at Dr. Koslowitz Psychology, and it's where like we talk. Like, I have this Subscriber Sunday where people ask me their parenting or their trauma or their recovery questions, and then I respond to them throughout the week with like really detailed answers. I have the Post-Traumatic Parenting podcast and YouTube channel. There's just like a ton of information. I felt like it shouldn't just sit in my head. It should be out there in the world. And there's so many people who tell me how helpful that is on their journey. Sometimes you can't access therapy right now. Like, it's not for you. It's not in your budget, or it's not, you don't have therapy. I always say is like the best gift you'll ever dread. And you have to be able to be there to do the work. I'm sure you both in business, sometimes there's a project and you think, it's not worth the money right now. Like, I just don't have it in me to pursue that project right now. Sometimes you don't have it within you to pursue therapy, but that's why you read a book, you put a pin in it for a little while, you start journaling, so that when you're ready to do it, you're like, oh, I know what I want now, and it's a good year for me, it works. Now is the time to actually, put it in.
Unpack it.
Yeah, to unpack it.
Beautiful. I'm so glad you were able to come and join us today.
Thank you so much.
It was
Thanks
great.
for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Learned so much.
All
Take
right,
care.
terrific.